Welcome back to Carneades.org. Today we're going to be looking at our second video in the series, How Skeptics Vote, where I'll be giving my personal endorsement for the 2020 U.S. presidential elections. Now, in light of the upcoming U.S. elections, we are discussing how one can be an indirect skeptic with no beliefs and still vote in elections. In the last video, we looked at some general considerations that a skeptic may take into account when voting. In this video, I'm going to give an example of these considerations as they pertain to the 2020 U.S. election. I'll give my own endorsement for the election, even though it may actually lose me subscribers and viewers that are otherwise inclined. For those of you outside the U.S., take this simply as an example of how these principles can be applied to an actual election, and apply them yourself in elections within your country, if you live in a democracy. Now, before we get to that story, so I grew up as an atheist in a small rural town where most people are religious. Many people in my community held their beliefs without question. They believed that being in a majority should allow them to impose their unfounded beliefs on others through public policy. Most people had very negative views of atheists. Certainly not all, but most. Politicians worked hard to erode secular government and impose their religious beliefs on others at the behest of their deeply dogmatic constituents. Despite non-religious people making up arguably nearly a quarter of the American population, really only one federally elected official, Pete Stark, has ever openly admitted to being an atheist. Americans on both sides of the aisle actively discriminate against atheists, with almost half of all Americans saying that they would not vote for a candidate simply for being non-religious. All of these facts lead me to care about public policy and care about how people vote and how people are represented, because I worry that there is a danger that the religious majority in the United States can work to oppress the non-religious minority. So with that, let's take a look at our criteria. So in the last video, we looked at 3 ways that skeptics may vote without beliefs. 1, other propositional attitudes. 2, an appearance of skepticism or lack of dogma within the candidate themselves. And 3, self-preservation for the skeptic. In what follows, I assessed both of the major party U.S. candidates for president based on these criteria. I'm only looking at these 2 candidates for reasons I covered in my series from the last presidential election 4 years ago on how third parties destroy democracy. Check out that series if you're interested. Now, both candidates are religious, which makes me afraid that they will try to impose their religion on others. However, this fear is greater with Trump than Biden, based on what appears to be their past actions. Biden pushed the Obama administration to support marriage equality, despite it conflicting with his own Catholic beliefs. Trump's vice president actively supports conversion therapy, which imposes the unfounded religious beliefs of one group on children who have no power to defend themselves, at often great harm to those children. Biden claims to support abortion access, despite his personal religious belief that it is wrong, because of his affirmation that religion should not inform public policy. Trump has actively fought for a judiciary and regulatory framework that imposes his beliefs on others by preventing abortions. From these and other actions, I'm hopeful that Joe Biden will govern in a secular way that respects the rights of all people, while I'm fearful that Trump will continue to try to force his beliefs on others. I don't know that these things will happen, but I doubt that anyone really does. Skeptics may also vote for someone who is skeptical like them, who will question dogma and is willing to change beliefs if their position is shown to be unfounded. While this trait is often derided as flip-flopping in politics, skeptics in a constant state of doubt may see virtue in those that are willing to doubt themselves and change their minds. Trump has consistently refused to change his mind in the face of evidence to the contrary. This started with claims that he had the largest inauguration in history, despite clear photographic evidence to the contrary, and continued all the way to his claiming that COVID-19 has gone away or is a hoax when it continues to kill hundreds of Americans each day. He's attempting to push through unproven vaccines to gain political capital at the risk of the American people. One might say that Trump has changed political beliefs, that he used to be a Democrat. However, these changes were not based on evidence, if you believe the words that he says. They were based on political expediency and his belief that Republicans are more gullible and easier to manipulate in a political sphere. Biden, on the other hand, has changed his views on a range of topics when faced with new evidence. He's changed his views on race relations, gay rights, the Hyde Amendment, and the Iraq War. In a representative democracy, leaders should react to the changing views of the people. For a skeptic, someone that is willing to change their views in light of new evidence is preferable to a dogmatist. The final question is around self-preservation. A skeptic may choose not to walk off a cliff, even if they do not believe it will kill them, because they fear that it might. Similarly, a skeptic may choose to vote against a candidate that appears to endanger their life, even if they do not know that this will happen. Members of the Trump administration, such as Mike Pompeo, actively believe and promote Christian nationalism, threatening non-Christians and attempting to eliminate all other religions in America. Pompeo also believes in using foreign policy to bring about the rapture, a concerning proposition coming from the top diplomat for anyone that wants to be alive, not just skeptics. Many evangelicals are voting for Trump based on the belief that he will continue our current crises, not make them better, and make them worse until he brings about the end of the world. Unless you also believe, as these evangelicals do, that bringing about the end of the world is a good thing, you might be concerned for your own self-preservation, that people who are supporting someone that they believe will destroy the world is probably a bad thing. Trump has fought against democratic norms, reducing voter rights, embracing dictators around the world, and threatening to not leave office if he loses. He has perverted the rule of law and the Justice Department to be a political tool to attack his enemies, not enforce the law. He's bragged about murdering people on Fifth Avenue and raping women. I have lived in real dictatorships around the world, as you see from Yahya Jammeh here. And they are deeply inhospitable to those who think differently or fail to conform. I'm deeply worried that if Trump is not soundly defeated, the U.S. may cease to be democracy and will fall deep into corruption. I'm worried that if you don't vote now, you won't have another chance to. I'm also afraid of Trump's record on human rights. He has gassed protesters for a photo op, fomented violence around the country, and supported white nationalist organizations. Human rights are the protection of the minority against the majority. As an atheist in the minority, I am deeply fearful of my own rights and freedoms. Biden has not expressly appealed to non-religious communities. If you watched the convention, if anything, he's appealed to a range of religious communities more. But he hasn't been actively hostile to non-religious communities either. He's advocated for the separation of church and state and spoken about his not wishing to impose his religious beliefs on others. He appears to have respect for the political process and basic human rights. We certainly can't know if he'll uphold these claims when he's in office, and we can't be certain that he will continue to have respect for the separation of church and state, given some of his statements. But when compared with the alternative, he certainly appears to be doing better. On the basis of these reasons, I'm voting for Joe Biden in November, and I hope that you do too. I do not know that this is the right choice, nor do I believe that he will be good for the country. However, I hope that he will, and I'm afraid of the harm that Trump will do if he's allowed to maintain power. I don't know that this is the right choice, but I don't think anyone can. I am worried for the United States right now, and I hope that that worry will turn into the ability of many people to see past their prior dogma and commit to trying to turn the country around. Regardless of who you vote for, I encourage you to vote. We don't know that any candidate will do good, but that doubt should not stymie our action. I cannot know if I'll do good by getting out of bed every morning, but that's not a reason not to try. Thanks for watching. I encourage you to subscribe if you haven't already, and if you agree with some of these views expressed here, because I guarantee you I will lose subscribers for this video. Watch this video and more here at Carneades.org, and stay skeptical, everybody.